Hello, my name is Jason, and today I'm going to be reviewing the book, The Simoqin Prophecies, by Samit Basu, Basu. Sorry, don't know. I apologize for getting the name wrong, if I did get it wrong. So I picked this book up several years ago. I was at the time Borders, I believe, when it was still a going bookstore, and I picked up this book and, checked it out and thought, hey, this sounds really good. So I purchased it, and I read it. And at the time, I was very thankful to have an acquaintance who was from India. There is a lot of nods to mythology and things that and terminology even that to me was unfamiliar because I haven't really studied a lot of Indian mythology. I know some of the basics, but not a lot of the specifics. So, for instance, the book talks about Rakshasas, which are demons, shape-shifting demons. One of the ways you could tell that it was a Rakshasa was that their hands were backwards, meaning that the palm of their hands, instead of being here on the front, was actually the back, so that their fingers, instead of closing in this manner, they would close wrapping around the other way. Thumb still on the same side, but anyway, kind of bizarre. So, like I said, I got this book, and it did take me a while to get through. There are multiple branching storylines. There's a prince of a country, and he is put in danger right at the start and rescued because he may be the hero that everybody's looking for. His own people were putting him to death because he was getting too ambitious, and apparently this is what they did to all princes that got too ambitious. He was, his brother was basically the heir to the throne, and he was a secondary, superfluous prince, and he was getting too big. But he was rescued by another going concern. But then the storyline shifts, and you are introduced to a city named Kol, where a lot of the action takes place, and a man named Kiran who goes around with a Pashan named Spikes. And Pashan is one of the things that I had to ask my friend about, because I was reading the book and I was thinking, well, this sounds an awful lot like the trolls described by Terry Pratchett. But I was confused about the term Pashan, and I couldn't figure out. I did some Google searches and stuff. I couldn't figure it out, and I went to this friend of mine and I said, hey, what was Pashan? Is that something? And he said, no, it's not something, but there's a Sanskrit word, Pashan, it means stone. And I was like, oh, basically trolls. So at that point, the Pashan made sense to me from that perspective. They were beings made of stone, and they wandered around. Yeah. Anyway, the background in the book, or what's running on in the background, is that not only is this hero being looked for and things, but there was a demon named Don Gem. At least that's what I named him from what I could read. And Don Gem was prophesied to return. He'd been defeated once, he was prophesied to return. And everybody's getting really nervous because Don Gem, the time for his resurrection was coming around. And so they were understandably nervous because Don Gem was pretty scary when the first time he was there. And it took quite a bit in order to defeat him. And so Kiran, again with his friend Spikes, he's kind of a mysterious figure. He has abilities and as I recall. It's been a while since I've read it, but as I recall, he has some abilities that people are kind of curious about. They're like, these don't normally occur. And that's kind of one of those, this should tip you off that you need to worry about this person. In fantasy, in a lot of books anyway, it's the people with the odd abilities that get singled out. But kind of the typical story, or at least it seems that way. Kieran is separate from this prince that I mentioned that was rescued at the beginning. But Kieran, the prophecy could also be about him. And the prophecy was that he would return, and that in order for him to return, these items would need to be gathered. And the return, it could be that he would need to, that the hero needed these items in order to defeat Don Gem, but it could also be that they were there, gathered, that they needed them so that Don Gem could manifest. There's a lot of uncertainty, which is good. It kept the story moving forward. As I said, it was somewhat difficult to get through because there was a lot of things in there that I had to go and I came across a term, or I came across, because there's mention of the like gods and some of the folklore and things behind how the universe was created, and so when I would come across these terms, I would go and I would have to try to figure out what that term meant so that I could figure out what the story was. Because, like I said, with the mention of the Pashan, I didn't understand that word, and apparently Pashan is stone, and it triggered that. Well, they're kind of like the trolls from Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. There were dwarves, but they didn't necessarily call them straight up dwarves. I forget the term they used. There were different types of magicians and magic and and different beings, and so I needed that extra time to look up the background, look up some of the mythology and things so that I could understand, okay, so this was a god that was a destroyer, and this was a god, the same person, but in a different guise, who was the bringer of life, and because death and birth are that kind of imagery. So it is a good read. Don't get me wrong, it is a good read. If you're not familiar enough with Indian folk, Indian as opposed to Native American, if you're not familiar with that kind of folklore and religious terminology and the legends and things, you might struggle a bit in certain parts, not understanding what is going on, or what what motivates a character to act in a certain way, because a typical Western character wouldn't act that way, because that wouldn't be part of their upbringing and motivation. So it has, like I said, it has a lot of that in it, with and a lot of the typical fantasy type tropes with the hero and magicians and magic users and various mythical creatures, but a lot of it centered once again on Indian folklore. So it was an education, and quite an interesting book. This is the first book in the series. There's actually two more that follow it. I believe the second one is the Manticore's Secret, and the third one is the Unwaba Revelations. It's part of the Game World trilogy, and it is well worth the time and effort to track down, read. I'm, again, not sure how to say his name, Samit Basu, or Basu, did a great job in weaving the the different storylines together and showing how they intersect and how how the characters relate to one another and the different developments that they go through in the 3-book trilogy. So definitely a good book, definitely one that I've kept on my bookshelf and plan to read again, possibly once I get through all the other books that I haven't read. So until then, like and subscribe, put the bell on to receive notifications, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and until then, enjoy what you're reading.